right, so good morning, everyone. So again, I am Adrienne and I am the Director of Family and Community Engagement here at Special School District. I just want to take this opportunity to welcome you to our schools. And I want you to really look around at everybody who's here with you, because you have joined something that is a pretty big deal. This is a huge organization, right? And paraprofessionals are in an organization in another location. And so when I look out at all of you, I want you to know that this is just a fraction of the team that you have joined, right? So when you think about that, that's a large, large organization. And so we really want to welcome you, and hopefully we make you feel like when we say you're able to give us a call if you have a question, that you really do take us up on that, because we are here to serve you, students and families. So thank you guys once again for joining our amazing team. My goal today is for us to have sort of an interactive presentation. I know that everybody doesn't like to speak out, so I created an opportunity for you to join me as we learn together using Pear Deck. So if you have a device and you are able to see a screen, then I am asking that you join me here. So you will have to go to joinpd.com and enter the code on the screen. That code is JNULQ space EU. So yes, JN space ULQE space, EU. If you can join, that is great. I want you to know that I don't take myself that seriously. I just like the content and the topic, and we're gonna have some fun. All right, so we're going to give you a few more minutes. In addition to Pear Deck, there will be some opportunities for you to talk at your table. And I am simply going to use the hand signal as the attention signal to that. So if you see me in the middle with my hand up, then I'm just going to ask you to do the same thing. Just mirror the hand up so that we can get to lunch in an hour, right? I think lunch is important. No one should stand between you and lunch. The code again is JN space ULQ space EU. So as we gather together in the space, I see some of you have already started to work. We're going to spend our day talking about family engagement. And what I'd like you to do is just tell me, when you think of family engagement, what are some of the key concepts that come to mind? And you will not see them populate on the screen. I have them before me. So thank you all for joining. I see buy-in, communication, participation, flexibility, relationship building, collaboration, anticipating parent concerns, communication again, communication, love and support, safe environments, listening, understanding, compassion and respect, communication, no phones. I have mine for a reason, remember? Action. You guys are all on the right page when we're talking about family engagement. Those are all the things that are going to be important to what we discuss today. So just wanted to get some information from you. These are the outcomes that we have for today's group. All day, you're going to hear that we are here to help you, to equip you, to help you excel, and to empower you within the first 30 days of your work here at the district. So this is just to help you on board, but we are here to support you all over the board. During our time together, these are the outcomes that we are hoping to achieve for you. We want you to understand your purpose and the value you add to every school culture that you enter. We also want to share with you some research-based information called the process conditions that support improving student outcomes, and then the benefits of family engagement. That's what we want you to know. At the end of today, we also want you to be able to build positive relationships with families and leverage those relationships for improving student outcomes. We want you not just to know those 6 process conditions, but how do you integrate those 6 process conditions into your classroom learning system so that what you do every day, the hard work you're doing, is actually working to make an impact for students. And lastly, how do you gain support? How do you seek support from agencies and divisions within our district to support their students on campus? So this is how we're going to get there today. This is our agenda. We just surfaced a little bit about what is true family engagement from your lens, what you have identified. We're going to also talk about why family engagement is important to the work that we do. The third thing we're going to discuss today is how to begin and what supports are available. And lastly, opportunities to engage all. How family engagement is an equity principle that when we use it, we're intentionally removing barriers to access for students and families. And we're doing this work so that everyone who wants to engage can and should. So when we talk about family engagement here at SSD, you guys spoke a lot about communication, relationships, support, involvement. Those things are correct. But I want us to all be on the same page, and I want to share with you what our definition is that we work from here in the district. When you hear family engagement at SSD, we're talking about a shared responsibility. That means that home, school, and community are working together. That means that we as school know that we have to actively engage with families, that we have to reach out to them to bring them into our system. We also know that this work does not stop. How many of you are elementary age are going to be working in elementary schools? You're going to see families, right? Elementary schools, oftentimes we have parents dropping off students in elementary, right? Early childhood, you will see families dropping off. It's fun. Your kids want you to be engaged in elementary school. How many of you are middle school or secondary? Yeah, family engagement looks a little trickier by that time. But what we're saying to you and what we know is that families are needed just as much, if not even more, at the secondary level. And we often find it difficult because we all look at it from the elementary perspective, and we think they should just show up for these things. But I remember when my child transitioned to middle school, and when I wanted to come to the school, you know what he told me? No. He said it would be absolutely embarrassing if I came to the school. So we're going to talk a little bit about those things and some of the dynamics and different things. But family engagement is continuous. We say it's from cradle to career, that families have to be part of that work to support their students throughout that entire time. And we have to help them learn how to do that. The other piece of our definition is that family engagement isn't just about feeling good and having great relationships with families. If we're not reinforcing learning, then we're actually failing everybody involved. right? We know people who have great relationships with families, that they live in the same community. But if we're not sharing the data or the strategies to support learning that takes place outside of the schools, then we've missed that opportunity. So family engagement to us is shared responsibility. All of us have that. It is continuous. So if you're in high school, we still have to engage families. And it is that shared responsibility of reinforcing learning across settings. That's after-school programs in their homes. That's what family engagement is. I'm gonna stop talking for a second. If you have joined me on Parent, I want you to take 2 minutes and look at the document on your screen. This document is called the Dual Capacity Framework for Family-School Partnerships. This document is visual representation of over 40 years of research regarding family engagement. Take a few minutes and just review the tool. I want to draw your attention to the first image, the first set of squares that you see. It's under a column that says the challenge. What do you see just about the visual representation of the 2 squares? They're separate. Do you know who's in those 2 squares? Us and the families, educators and the families. That's intentional, because what we know is that there is often a gap. There's often some space between the 2. Why do you think that is? Not even looking at the box. What has been some experience? Anybody want to shout something out at me? Yes. So they're thinking that they're getting this negative information from people who seem to have power over the situation.
I see the physical space for different spaces.
So just the simple fact that school and home are separate, right?
They personally have had a bad time at school or hardships at school, and so they don't feel connected to it personally.
Absolutely. Someone's past experiences in education or in the community itself, right? So even when we look at this and when we take information from new teachers and veteran teachers alike, what we really hear is there's sometimes a fear. There's a fear. How do I share this information with the family, especially bad information or negative information? Because that's important to the work that we do. We have to share the data. We have to be brave enough to share the data. But the real thing is, do we do it in a way that is compassionate? Have we built relationships before we share that data? When we look at what's written on our dual capacity framework, it says that educators lack exposure to strong examples of what true family engagement is. If I asked you in this room today, how many of you spent at least 12 hours of coursework in your pre-service program to become an educator, social worker, an SLP, in family engagement. How many of you can stand up? I see one hand. Do I see another? 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's not even a requirement in pre-service education, but all schools, pre-service education programs, when the deans were interviewed, they all stated that family engagement was one of the largest ways to impact education. And I say that because they are on a mission to change that, right? They are doing the work to make the changes, but we know that educators feel like they are not well prepared to do that work. Families have the same concern. They also say, I don't feel like I have the information I need to help navigate these conversations or these times in schools. We already surfaced deficit mindsets on both sides, right? If you've taught for any period of time, you've encountered an overwhelmed parent. You've encountered a very angry parent. You may have even encountered a parent that we call helicopter parent. Right? I heard you guys audible on that. Right? You've encountered parents who feel like they have to demand things from you because they haven't consistently received them in other places. So these are challenges. Families do say, I don't feel valued or respected or honored in that space, so I may not engage. So that's the challenge, and that's why we're in this room today, is because we want to better equip you to do the work that we know makes a difference with family engagement. If you move over to the right of that document, it tells you about essential conditions. That's like the world, like the ecosystem where family engagement thrives. And you'll see that there's a box that talks about process conditions and another that says organizational conditions. Organizational conditions are the conditions that special school district is responsible for to make this happen for you. It says that family engagement has to be systematic, that it has to be integrated, and it has to be sustained in our practices. It says we can't just stand in front of you today and talk about, hey, this is what family engagement is, go forth. But we actually have to build family engagement into the systems that you were using. We have to integrate it into all of the practices. But the process conditions you can own. The process conditions tell us that relationships matter, that families have to feel like they are invited into the work. Because what we know is that many places build great family engagement nights. Have you ever gone or have you ever worked in a school that had a math night? A literacy night, back to school, open house, you bought food, you bought giveaways, you created activities, and sometimes the families you wanted to come still didn't show up. So what research told us, because there's a national group of family engagement practitioners, what we really learned in that process is, if you build it, they will not come if they don't trust you. So what we need to build first is relationships. Have you ever been somewhere where you didn't feel welcome? Were you eager to return? And I know in the back of your mind, some of you are saying, but their child is there, right? You're saying that. But let me ask you, are there kids you have great relationships with and you don't like to talk to their parents? So the families know that you've taken care of their children, but they're still individuals and they still have that same internal desire to protect themselves. So what we know is that building relationships with families based on their students is the way that we need to go to do the work. So let's talk a little bit about making some explicit connections and why this is important to us. Why do you think it's vital? Look at school and education. Positive outlook, right, on education. It improves communities, right? If a school in a community is a beacon of light to the families, then you have buy-in. One of the things that really shocked me when I started doing this work is, do you know that most people in school communities do not have school-aged children? Most people who are paying the taxes in school districts are people who do not have school-aged children. So how the community feels about the school that you are serving in makes a huge difference. What else is the reason why family engagement might be vital? What's the purpose? It's part of helping the whole child. Absolutely, helping the whole child. We know that when children come to school, they don't come and leave their families behind. They come with their families in their backpacks. They come with the communities in their backpack. We have to honor and teach all of it, right? So when we talk about family engagement and why it is important, I want to make some explicit put this in context for you here. Our district, along with every school district in Missouri, has a policy called IGBC, which is about parent and family engagement. Every school district has a policy. In our district, we also have a strategic plan that tells us that we're working as a system to engage families using evidence-based practices. We know that ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act, which was reauthorized in 2015, also talks about engaging families as an equitable principle, right, for low-performing schools. That is important that we're doing this work, but we know family engagement is important for all schools. And then we have IDEA that says children, the children that we are servicing here in special school district, that their parents are so essential to the outcome, and that we have to engage them and make sure that they have meaningful input into the educational plans for their students. I'm also going to share some data with you really quickly, because I think this is powerful. If you've worked in schools before, do you sometimes feel that you spend more time in a school setting than you do in your own home? Yes. Everybody always says yes, right? We do. It's your second home. It becomes your other community, your other family. But there's a gentleman by the name of Herbert Walberg who did a study called Curriculum of the Home. And what he did was he looked at the math. He said that students from birth to 18 years of age, if you do the math, that only 9% of that, or I'm sorry, 8% of that time is in schools. And so one of my colleagues actually did the pie graph that is next to you. And she looked at what a full day is. She said, let's not do birth. Let's look from K through 12th grade, a typical student in SSD schools. And what that tells you there, I'm speaking over your shoulder, 54% of that time is where? Home or the community? What percentage do you see where they're actually in school if they have perfect attendance? 13% from K through 12th grade. So what does that tell us? That reinforcing learning across settings other than school is imperative to the work that we're doing. If you're solely holding yourself responsible for educating students, and I get it, you're the teacher, you are the expert in that curriculum, but you have to bring your partners into that classroom. You have to start those conversations with families like, hey, we do this together. That's how you start. And then we're just gonna briefly touch on this when we talk about family engagement in education and why it matters. It helps you as an educator. We know that educators who are in schools where families are involved report greater job satisfaction. We know that teachers stay in schools that have greater family engagement. We know that students achieve at a higher rate when their families are engaged. That's even college students, right? When you know you have the support, better social skills, better functional skills, better outcomes for students exist when we start those partnerships. And then we know that family engagement, when we remove barriers, when we talk to families about what they need, that we're creating equitable outcomes for all students. So I'm going to stop and I'm going to give you a couple minutes to just talk about that. Talk about what is coming up for you. Take 2 minutes at your table. You'll see a hand signal after 2 minutes to just have you come back so we can move through. Thank you. Thank you for having that discussion. I hope there were some robust thoughts happening there. We're going to move on to our next section. How do we begin? And what supports are available? So the next slide is really going to ask you a question. It's going to talk about those process conditions that we talked about in the purple box, and I'm going to explain them a little more. Which of the following process conditions do you think is most important? So when we talk about the different things that have to take place from your classroom setting to really engage families in a way that improves student outcomes, Linked to Learning says that we have to make all of our work intentional so that we're developing families so that they have knowledge about the skills and the learning that's taking place in the classroom. That's what Linked to Learning means. If you have families' attention, then give them something that will make a difference. If they come, if they call, make sure you have something that will improve an outcome for their student. When we talk about interactive, as adults, you've been sitting here and you'll have 3 days of orientation. We know that you need an opportunity to talk, to process, to actually engage with the materials. Families are exactly the same. If you're teaching a math strategy, if you're teaching a skill to improve reading, then they also need an opportunity to practice that skill. That goes into the collaborative part that's on this list, and interactive. That sit-in kits don't work for adult learners as well. We also know that being asset-based, all families have something that they can give and that they can participate with, and we have to find that opportunity for families to share. We talked about relationships and building trust, but we also need to make sure that we're being culturally responsive and respectful to their practices. We had just planned an event, or we thought we had planned an event, and then when we looked on our calendar, we found out it was the beginning of Ramadan. So you know what we had to do? We shifted, because we want to be culturally responsive, right? So which do you think is the most important? Well, thank you guys for answering. So a lot of you are answering various things, and I know all of them are important, right? Who wants an all of the above? Yeah, we don't do that here. No, but they are all important, right? All of them are important. But I want you to remember the one we talked about earlier was that we have to have relationships. That research told us that without relationships, everything else that we're doing can be viewed incorrectly. So think about someone giving you good information, but in a bad way, or you not knowing them when they gave it to you. Was it easy for you to take that from somebody who never called? No. So we'll talk about that, just building those relationships with families. This is the second version of this document. It was really reimagined about 5 years ago, because all of the professionals came together and said, if you don't have relationships, nothing works. Nothing works. You can be the greatest teacher in the world. And I'm not asking anybody to change their personality. Everybody does not just emote sunshine and rainbows all the time, right? I love popping on trolls, but I also love branch, right? And so we all don't have that. But if we know you care, and if you're taking the time to show that you're interested, then that builds relationships with families, letting them know. The part about trust is also important. This is the trust triangle. This is an organizational triangle that talks about what trust really is and how it is developed. And what you'll see on the base of that triangle is straight talk, being honest. If my child is not meeting the goal, someone needs to tell me, because that's how I intervene. And then we need to listen to one another with understanding, not for a response, not with a defensive posture. We have to really listen to the hearts of the families, because guess what? You may have their students for 1 year, but they've had them forever. So we have to listen, and we'll show you some tools that do that. And then I want to just take a second and I want to just redirect some of this. Some people think family engagement is just about caring. And I want to challenge that and say, that would lead to inequities, right? If we said family engagement is about you being a caring individual, then that means that the kid who has the teacher that is going through a struggle at that time and can't give that much energy to certain things is not gonna get the service that they need. So I'm gonna challenge us to move from the fact that, oh, that's just not my personality, I don't do that, to the fact that this is about setting conditions, policies, and processes, and having communication plans and sharing information. It's about systems. It's about intentionality. So we want to talk about that. In our last section, I told you guys we're going to get to lunch. In our last section, we're going to talk about the opportunities that are available. This is the nuts and bolts of family engagement and things that you can do and places you can find information to support you as you start your journey. In our work, we have 4 core beliefs, and we're going to use these 4 core beliefs to break down strategies for you to use with families. The 4 core beliefs sometimes challenge you. The first one is that all families have dreams for their children and they want the best for them. They didn't accidentally say all. They really meant all. Because what we know is only 1% of families are apathetic or just unable. So that leaves 99%. So we say that's all. The other core belief is that all families have the capacity to support their child's learning. Meaning that even if a family is experiencing a challenge, there is one way that we can ask them to support learning. We don't take that opportunity from them. The third core belief is that parents, families, and teachers should be equal partners. You have to share the load. You have to share the load. And we're going to talk about that. And the last one is that we do have a responsibility to reach out to parents. And I'm going to say this to you, but it is really important that our school leaders are also creating that culture for you to do so. So let's talk about it. When we talk about hopes and dreams, this is really listening for that understanding. This is focusing on what the student and the family's goals are. This is coming from a true strengths-based process. But it's also recognizing if a family is overwhelmed, if they are experiencing crisis after crisis, that we have to be honest, they may not want to come to Matt tonight. So who else can support this learning? Who else may be able to help and assist? And so here are some strategies or some tools. You will see charting the life course tools in our district a lot because we find them very valuable. These tools can be used as they are. They can be changed or adapted. You don't even have to have the tool to utilize it. But most of you are probably going to start the beginning of your year with information that's like an all about me or a getting to know me. This tool is that. It is a non-threatening way of saying, what's something that other people admire about you? But the most important, and the box that I love the most is, how can I support you? And you can ask students to fill this out, families to fill it out. You can even fill it out as your introduction to you. So that families get to know you, and when you send it home to them, they've seen how you filled it out, you've modeled it. Now they have an opportunity to do it the same. Throughout our district, we use these tools to support the IEP process. You're getting the information. The important thing is to close the loop and use that information with families to show them that you actually listen. Show of hands, how many of you have ever filled out a survey and never gotten any information about where that data went? Does that make you happy? Does it feel like you wasted your time? That's how our families feel when we get information from them and we don't integrate it into practice. Another tool that you're going to learn or you're going to see is the trajectory tool. This one is basically hopes and dreams. And you do not, again, have to have this piece of paper. We've used this and we've just created circles on the tops and the bottoms of a piece of paper. But what it says is, what do you want? What is the outcome that you want from your student at the end of this year? What do you not want is just as important as what you do want. And these also guide that conversation. These are conversation starters for families and for you, especially if you're really trying to build that relationship with families. And then also, you have access to them. So we have linked the resources that you'll need. We've linked those pages for your review. So we're gonna move a little faster here, but when we talk about the impact of families and that all families have the capacity to support learning, what's really important is that oftentimes we've told ourselves that families who don't show up just don't, right? That families who don't show up don't care. And I see people now that not true, right? It is not true. What we know is that there are three things that determine how involved or engaged families are in education and their own life. Cultural background makes a difference. It makes a difference because some cultures defer to schools. They think they should not come. They do not feel like they should involve themselves in school matters. It also matters how your parents engaged in school because they modeled that for you. The other one that they say is important is efficacy. Do I feel like I'll make a difference or I can help you in that area? People don't do what they don't think they can do well. And the last one is whether or not they feel welcome to engage. And that's the most important one. My background, my efficacy are important, but if you engage me and you tell me that I have what I need to participate and to help my child, and that you are willing to partner with me, then you've given me the green light to actually work with you. But oftentimes we sort of set up situations where families feel excluded from the process. I want you to think about what the doors say at school sometimes. I see smiles. I go to schools and I see stop signs immediately on the door. And we all know it's for safety. Those are important things. But can we message that a little differently so that families do feel invited into the learning environment? And so when we talk about this one, we're saying, let's seek family input. Let's invite families into the learning. Many of you said family engagement is two-way communication. It is. But often you're going to find yourself in partner districts. You're going to be working outside of SSD, supporting physically in other districts. And what a parent told me most recently is, I understand that we say two-way communication, but she was like, Adrian, it's really three for me. And what she also told us in that same conversation is this: you guys send out great newsletters, but sometimes it's too much for me. But if my child's teacher told me this was something I needed to do, I would do it. So I want you to understand your power when it comes to communicating and sharing information with families. They're getting district level notifications from SSD. They are receiving district level notifications from whatever school district their students in. They're also possibly receiving other things like Peach Jar, different ways. It's overwhelming. They have said they would really appreciate if you could help streamline what you think is important to them. So that's what we're talking about when we're saying sharing with them, listening to what they need so that when you're receiving these tools as well, you can say, hey, this sounds like this would be great for Johnny's parents who's looking for training on behavior intervention. The third one is equal partners. We talked about shared responsibility already. We talked about having partnerships and common goals. Think about this for a second. You have a role as the teacher. Your families have a role. Your students have a role. How do we set expectations? We have to tell everybody what the roles are. We have to make those decisions. But we can't meet those goals if we haven't talked about them. So the question that I'm asking on the platform or on the device up there is, did we provide each team member with the information to support success in that area? Do we have an expectation of families who have not gone to school to be educators that they know how to do the work at home? I laugh all the time because in the summer you see all school boards say, read with your child 20 minutes a day. And I often say to myself, if we told parents what that did, if we carried that message home, if we actually said it doesn't matter if they read the same book, because sometimes switching the genre causes a problem, right? If we gave more information of just have them read, because it will improve fluency, decoding. All of these things will get better for your child if we could help with that. And so when we talk about equal partners and we talk about sharing strategies, I am not saying that you have to create a lesson for your student and for their family. That would be ridiculous. But what I am asking, or what I am saying, is that when you do use videos to model, or when you do have materials or anchor charts and different things that you're using to support your students' learning, that we share those with the families as well. So if they're actually reinforcing the learning at home, then they have the tools and they have the language. Math is being taught differently now. You know how we talked about efficacy being important? Imagine yourself sitting at a table teaching your 8-year-old how to add and subtract and multiply, and they tell you, that's not how my teacher did it. That was my experience. So I called the teacher and she taught me how to do the mental math so that I wouldn't say the words the wrong way, right? So that I wouldn't feel defeated and frustrated and I wouldn't stop supporting my child at home. So this talks about just the different resources that are available in the district. If you haven't learned about our Instructional Resource Center, I advise you to really check them out, because it is a library of materials and manipulatives that you can use in your classroom, but you can also send them home with kids and their parents to support learning. Just gonna highlight this for you here, is that all family engagement is not the same. That there are low impact strategies and high impact strategies. And what we know is we tend to stay on the lower side because it seems a little easier, but we can say potlucks, fundraisers, those type of things are welcoming events, and they are great to get families in the door. But if we really want to engage them, we really want to have impact with their students' growth, then we have to lend ourselves a little more to the right side. That's personal communication. Those are data folders. And not data folders that just happen on Friday once the test has been taken, but data folders that actually share strategies and give them information to make an impact on what's coming next. So this is what we mean about those high impact strategies. When you look to the right, those are all of the principles that we saw in process conditions. When you think about the high impact strategies, they require relationships. They share data. They provided those interactive moments for families as well. And then our last option is reaching out. You guys laughed when I said that you spend more time in schools. Sometimes it feels that way than with families. I mean, with your own families. So when we think about that, when school is your home away from home, when people come to your real home, you make decisions about how far they're able to engage with you. You actually make a decision on whether or not you open the door and let them know you're there. Schools are the same way. We gatekeep at the front office, right? We know that. And so family engagement really says, how are we reaching out and how are we creating opportunities for families to really come in and see the work? And so I am going to encourage you to think about some of these strategies. Maybe it's inviting them to something that's happening at the school. And if they say they can't make it, you can tell them, hey, I'm going to be here. I'll be here waiting for you, because sometimes just having a friendly face or someone you know will come through the door. We have a lot of opportunities for families to engage on the district level, and I've listed those for you. We have a Family Leadership Institute that's coming up. We do it twice a year. This is a great time for families to really learn how to support their child through the special education process, to network with other families, and to become familiar with leadership in our district. So we invite you to use those. We also have family workshops and parent advisory councils and different things for families. All you have to do is reach out to FACE to get that information. And for the time you've been waiting for, we're gonna close, but I want you to really know this. You make a huge difference in the lives of the students that you serve. I can talk about family engagement all day because I love it and I know how powerful it is and how powerful it has been in the lives of my children. But I will tell you this, that you are the place where change happens for our students. Your classroom is the place where families engage with our district. So please think about that. When you're making your decisions about how you communicate, when you're thinking of developing your newsletters, how are you creating opportunities for families to contact you? Do they know your plan period? Or are they getting a voicemail every time? Thinking about those pieces. These were the outcomes for today. Hopefully we have achieved them. Hopefully you know those 6 process conditions. You understand them a little more, that you actually understand why the relationships with families are so important. And the last piece is, I want you to know who FACE is. So I'm going to invite you to visit with us. We will have a resource table tomorrow, and you will be able to meet our team. I don't see them in the room right now because they are actually working for you right now. We just had 4 carloads of school supplies delivered to this building while I was speaking. They are organizing that for you so that you can go shopping and grab whatever you think you need for your classrooms. So tomorrow, during the resource fair, we're inviting you, and I know Molly and Wendy and Tina will give you the information. We're inviting you to room B205 during the resource fair between 2 and 4 to come and shop, and I do mean shop. We still have supplies left over from last year. That's how many supplies they get. So please, as we are concluding right now, I want you to think of something that you plan to do. What's your commitment after today's learning to meaningfully engaging families? Add something to the chart that you're willing to hold yourself accountable for. What is something that you are willing to do? Thank you. I see newsletters and Google numbers and data folders, reaching out, the introductions, open communication, clear contact information. That's so important. Rapport, sharing strategies with families. You guys are on the right path. Thank you guys for listening. If you have a concern or you didn't know where to start, I'm going to give you these 2 options here. Be intentional about your communication with families. Have a plan that if you haven't seen a family or talked to a family within the first 2 weeks, be real intentional about it. Talk to your school's administration and say, what's the policy here about home visits? Can we have an opportunity to go say hello or to check in on these families? Make sure that you have a plan to communicate and that you're sharing it with families. So that's one thing you can choose, or making sure that you're sharing strategies. If it's a big unit, make it a big unit for everybody involved. The family needs to know too, so that they can reinforce that learning. That is it for me. Here is our feedback code.